Equations and Formulas, Algebra 1 EOI Review. I'm going to refer to this chart quite a bit during these review videos, and I want to take a minute to explain what the full chart is, and then in the following videos it will just talk about what we are talking about with that lesson. So this entire chart, I'm going to go by column. So in this first column that's highlighted blue, it's going to tell you the standard or what standard is being taught or being tested in this instance. So we have three standards in Algebra 1. We have number sense and algebraic operations, relations and functions, and data analysis, probability, and statistics. Underneath each standard, you'll notice like for number sense and algebraic operations, which would be standard 1, there's two breakdowns, 1-1 and 1-2. What that does is it tells you your objective. If you move to the next column that's highlighted purple, it kind of explains what the objective is. So 1-1 is equations and formulas, 1-2 is expressions, 2-1 is relations and functions, 2-2 is linear equations and graphs, and so on. Now, what the next column tells us is how many questions on the EOI are going to be over each objective and standard. So if you look at the standard number sense and algebraic operations, it says the ideal number of items, which means they're not going to guarantee that there's going to be 15 questions over that standard, but that's what they're shooting for when they're making the test. So there's going to be 15 questions over number sense and algebraic operations. Below the bold 15, you'll notice that it breaks it down a little bit further. So in those 15 questions for number sense and algebraic operations, 6 of them are going to be over equations and formulas, and 9 of them are going to be over expressions. And you can do that with each standard and that standard's objectives. Notice that in the total test, there's going to be 55 questions. What I want to tell you is that 55 questions are going to be graded. However, they put what they call field questions on this test also. So 5 to 10 extra questions will be on the test. They will not count against you, but the kicker is you don't know which questions are field questions and which questions are questions that are going to be graded. So it's very important that you take every single question that they ask you on the test seriously and try your best on all of them. The last column is going to be the ideal percentage of the test. So if you look at, they just give this for each standard. So number sense and algebraic operations will make up 27% of the test. Relations and functions is going to account for 56% of the test. Notice that is a huge chunk of the test. Over half is just over standard 2. And then data analysis, probability, and statistics is going to be 16% of your test. So if you look at that breakdown, it's going to tell you what's really, really, really important that you need to know. Just by getting all of the relations and functions questions correct, you've almost passed the test just based on that one standard. The flip side of that is if you don't know your relations and functions and you do not do well on that standard, it can make you not pass the test based on just one standard. So it can be nice and it can be not so nice at the same time. So there's the whole chart explained. Today what we're going to talk about is number sense and algebraic operations. We're going to be talking about standard 1-1, which is equations and formulas. The first thing we need to talk about is writing variable expressions from words or phrases and vice versa. So writing variable expressions keywords is the first thing we need to talk about. Anytime you see the word is, it's going to mean whatever they're talking about is going to be equal to each other. So anytime you see the word is, it's going to be the equal symbol. Some keywords that indicate addition would be plus, more than, the sum of, the total of, increased by, and added to. Some subtraction keywords would be minus, less than, the difference of, less, decreased by, and subtracted from. Multiplication keywords would be times, the product of, twice, double, tripled, etc., multiplied by, and of. And then some division keywords would be the quotient of, divided by, and the ratio of. These should be words that you're fairly familiar with now. The one thing that sometimes is hard to remember is when you have the words less than or greater than, you're going to flip the order in which they appear. So what that means is that if I say 3 less than 5, it's not going to be 3 minus 5. We have to flip the order in which they appear. Even though it says 3 less than 5, it needs to be 5 minus 3. So we flip, even though 3 was said first, it's going to be flipped with 5, so that we're subtracting 5 minus 3. Some examples of this, of word phrases and expressions, says that when a number is multiplied by 6 and the product is decreased by 9, the final result is 33. Which equation represents this statement? First thing that can be helpful is to go ahead and highlight or underline some key words. So some of the things that I highlighted were a number is multiplied by 6. I don't know what the number is, so I'm going to assign it the variable. If you look at your answers, they've assigned it x. Then it says the product is decreased by 9, which means I need to take whatever I multiply and I need to subtract 9. And then it says the final result is 33, which means whatever I get when I have a number multiplied by 6 and then decreased by 9, it's going to equal 33. The best answer here is going to be A. Notice B. They've done 9 minus 6x, but that's the wrong order. And then C and D are both incorrect because it says we need to multiply the number by 6 first and then decrease it by 9. The next example says which sentence represents this equation. The equation is n equals 6n minus 4. Go ahead and take all of your answer choices and write an expression or an equation for them. A says 6 times a number is 4 less than a number. So 6 times a number would be 6n. Is would be equal, and then 4 less than a number would be n minus 4. Well, that is not the equation that we are looking for, so A is not my answer. B says a number is 4 minus the product of 6 and the number. So a number is would be n equals 4 minus, so 4 subtraction symbol, the product of 6 and a number would be 6 times n. Notice again this one's kind of a little bit closer, but not quite what we're looking for. C says a number is, which means n is going to equal 4 less than means our order is going to flip, the product of the number and 6. So a number is would be n equals 4 less than the product of the number and 6 would be 6n minus 4. That is what I'm looking for, but if I'm not quite sure if I wrote that correctly, I need to go ahead and check D. If you look at D, it says 6 times the difference of a number and 4 is equal to the number. Anytime it says 6 times the difference, that means I'm going to be multiplying the subtraction problem by 6, which means I have to have parentheses around it. So this word expression written as an equation would be 6 parenthesis n minus 4 because I had to do 6 times the difference, and the difference is n minus 4, the whole thing. And then is equal to, the number would be equal to n. So D is not my correct answer. My correct answer is C. The next example says Anne practiced piano for X hours. Steve practiced piano 3 more hours than Anne. So if Anne practiced 6X hours, Then Steve is going to practice 3 more than that, which means Steve practiced x plus 3. And then it says Kate practiced piano 5 times as long as Steve. So we need to take Steve's amount of time that he practiced piano, and we need to multiply it by 5. We need to multiply the whole thing by 5, so we do need to put this in parentheses. This says which expression represents the total time they practiced piano. So what I need to do now is I need to take Anne, Steve's, and Kate's piano practicing times, and I need to combine them. If you look at your answer choices, notice that they haven't combined like terms. They've just written each person's time with an addition symbol in front of it to show that we're combining them and adding them together. My best answer here is going to be D. It has x for Anne plus x plus 3 for Steve plus 5 times x plus 3 for Kate. The next example says Sue's age is 12 years less than twice Jack's age. Let J represent Jack's age and S represent Sue's age. Which equation represents Sue's age? Again, I'm going to go ahead and just highlight or underline. It says Sue's age is, which means Sue's age, or S, is going to be equal to, it says 12 years less than twice Jack's age. This is that one that we have to remember that the order flips. It's less than, which means we're going to be subtracting. Because it says 12 years less than twice Jack's age, we're going to have to do twice Jack's age minus 12 years. So 2J minus 12 would be equal to Sue's age, which is D. To solve an equation for a variable, you have to use the distributive property, combine like terms, and use inverse operations to isolate the variable. You're not always going to have to use the distributive property or combine like terms, but if there are parentheses or more than one term that have the same variables, then you are going to have to use the distributive property and combine like terms. This first example says which equation is equivalent to the equation above when solved for y. In this instance, I'm going to have to go ahead and distribute my 2 first. Because it's 2 parentheses x plus y, I need to do 2 times x plus 2 times y. When I do that, I get 2x plus 2y minus z equals 2x plus z. My goal here is to solve for y, which means I need to get the y by itself. Right now there's only one y written in this equation, which is nice. So my goal is to get everything else on the other side of my equal sign. How I'm going to be able to do that is go ahead and use inverse operations. Get rid of what you're adding or subtracting to y first, and then get rid of what you're multiplying or dividing by y. So my first step is going to be to add z to both sides, and I'm also going to get rid of my 2x on both sides. What happens when I subtract 2x from both sides is it cancels out of my side that I'm subtracting from, of course. But then if you look on the right side of this equation, I have 2x minus 2x again, which is going to cancel each other out also. So I'm going to be left with 2y equals z plus z is 2z. Just a little hint, if you are writing this down, you might put the little dash through the middle of the z so that you don't get confused and think that it's like 22 instead of 2z. I've done that several times and it can be really frustrating when you don't see your answer in the end. The last step here is right now I'm multiplying 2 times y. The opposite of multiplying y by 2 is to divide it by 2. And when I do that, my 2's cancel out. And if you look at the 2z divided by 2, on that side, my 2's are also going to cancel out because 2 divided by 2 is just going to leave you with 1z. So I have y equals z, so my answer is B. The next example says the surface area of a sphere with radius r is given by the equation s equals 4 pi r squared. Which equation is equivalent to the given equation when solved for r? So I'm just going to rewrite the equation so that I have room to work. My goal here is to get r by itself. The first thing that I need to look at is what can I get rid of, and what order do I need to. First, look for addition and subtraction. I don't have any addition or subtraction right now. All I have is multiplication, and then I also have an exponent. When you're trying to isolate a variable, it's going to be the opposite of the order of operations. So I need to get rid of multiplication or division before I get rid of the exponent. I'm multiplying r by 4 pi, and I can divide r by 4 pi also. When I divide both sides by 4 pi, my 4 pi's cancel out, and I'm left with s divided by 4 pi equals r squared. The opposite of squaring something is taking the square root. So in order to get r by itself, I have to take the in order to get r by itself, I have to get rid of the squared, which means I have to take the square root. And whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So when I take the square root of both sides and I have to take the square root of everything on both sides, I'm going to get the answer C. R equals the square root of s divided by 4 pi. To solve a proportion, remember you have to cross multiply. You also need to, for this next example, remember that to multiply two binomials, you can use the FOIL method, you could use the distributive property, or you could make a table. It does not matter which choice you make on how you want to multiply two binomials. All of them will get you the same answer as long as you are using them correctly. So use whatever you're most comfortable with, or whatever you can use and get the correct answer. So when I cross multiply, I have 1 minus 4x divided by 2 plus x equals 3 minus 4y divided by y. It says if y is a non-zero constant, which equation represents the value of x in the given equation? In order to solve this problem, I'm going to have to go ahead and cross multiply. So I'm going to have y times 1 minus 4x equals 2 plus x times 3 minus 4y. That was just me getting my cross multiplication in order. I need to go ahead and distribute my y. Y times 1 is y, and y times a negative 4x is going to give me a negative 4xy. Now I have, I'm multiplying two binomials on the right side. I have 2 plus x times 3 minus 4y. I'm going to use the FOIL method because it's the fastest. So 2 times 3 would be my first, which is 6. My outer would be 2 times negative 4y, which is negative 8y. My inner terms would be x times 3, which is 3x. And my outer terms would be x times negative 4y, which will give me a negative 4xy. Now my goal is to solve for x. In order to solve for x, I need to get all of the other terms and constants on the other side. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add 4xy to both sides. This is nice when I add 4xy to both sides because they cancel out not only on the right side of my equation, but also on the left side. I have negative 4xy plus a positive 4xy, which cancels them out. I'm going to also go ahead and add 8y to both sides, and then I'm also going to subtract 6. When I do that and I combine all of my like terms, I'm going to end up with 9y minus 6 equals 3x. Now I need to divide both sides by 3. Remember, when you have to divide to isolate a variable, you have to divide everything on the other side by that number as well. So I'm not only dividing 9y, I'm also dividing a negative 6 by 3. Well, 9y divided by 3 will leave you 3y, and negative 6 divided by 3 will leave you with negative 2, so my answer here is going to be A. Using formulas. When given a formula to use, make sure that you plug in the correct values for each variable. You have to read your problem very carefully to make sure that you have the correct values and you know what variable they would need to be plugged in for. When substituting the values, put them in parentheses and use the order of operations when solving. This first example says a drink container is shaped like a cylinder. The height of the container is 10 centimeters, and the radius of the container is 6 centimeters. What is the approximate volume of the container? And it tells us to use 3.14 for pi. I'm going to stop really quickly and tell you, when you took the Math 08 test, you did not have a calculator on your test. When you take the Algebra 1 EOI, you do get a calculator on your test. So I'm not going to show you, for instance, for this problem, I'm not going to show you multiplying by 3.14 because you can just plug it into your calculator to solve. In this problem, they give us important information. They tell me that the height of the container is 10 centimeters. They also tell me that the radius of the container is 6 centimeters. My formula is given in the box, volume equals pi times radius squared times height. So what I need to do is I'm going to plug in, and it's also asking me for the approximate value, so I know it's not going to be volume. It's not going to be the perfect example or the exact answer. I'm sorry. Go ahead and plug in what you know into the formula. The volume is going to equal pi times 6 squared because 6 is the radius times 10 because 10 is the height. When you're dealing with circles and radius, be really, really careful. Sometimes they will try to trick you and give you the diameter. The diameter, remember, goes all the way across the circle. The radius only goes halfway through the circle. So if they give you the diameter and you need the radius to plug into your formula, just go ahead and take half of the diameter and plug it in for r. The first thing we need to do with the order of operations to find this volume and solve for the volume, I need to go ahead and square 6, which would give me pi times 36 times 10. Well, 36 times 10 is going to be 360 pi. Go ahead and, if you have a calculator handy, go ahead and do 360 times 3.14, and you'll find that the closest answer the closest answer choice to what you get should be D, 1,131 cubic centimeters. The next example says the temperature of a gas is negative 76 degrees Fahrenheit. What is the temperature of the gas in degrees Celsius? Notice in this formula they give us F equals 9 over 5C plus 32. Just using kind of common sense, we would figure out that F would be degrees in Fahrenheit and C would be degrees in Celsius. So I have negative 76 to plug in for F to this formula. My first step to solve for C, now that I only have one variable that I want to solve for, I'm going to treat this just like a two-step equation. So the first thing I need to do to isolate C would be to subtract 32 from both sides. When I do that, I get negative 108 equals 9 over 5C. Now you have two options again. You can either divide by 9 over 5, which would be the same as multiplying by 5 over 9, because remember you have to flip and multiply when you're trying to divide by a fraction. You can also just change it to a decimal, and that will also work. I believe it's 1.8, and so you could do that. And again, you have a calculator to use, so you could do negative 108 divided by 1.8, and your answer is B, negative 60 degrees Celsius. The next example says, a rectangular swimming pool has the measurement shown. The perimeter of the swimming pool is 80 meters. What is the value of X? I've gone ahead and in purple, I've showed you the perimeter of a rectangle formula. It's 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. So the information that we have is that the perimeter is 80 meters. So what I can do is I can plug in 2x plus 3 and x minus 2 into the formula, and I'm going to set it equal to 80 meters because they tell us that that's the perimeter of the swimming pool. What that's going to look like is 80 equals 2 times 2x plus 3 plus 2 times x minus 2. I'm going to have to use the distributive property here. 2 times 2x is 4x, and 2 times 3 is 6. and I'm going to have to use the distributive property again. 2 times x is 2x, and 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. I end up with 80 equals 4x plus 6 plus 2x minus 4. I'm going to go ahead and combine my like terms on the right side of this equation. I can just combine my 4x plus 2x is 6x, and 6 minus 4 is going to give me 2. So when I combine like terms, I have 80 equals 6x plus 2. Subtract 2 from both sides, and you get 78 equals 6x. Now I need to divide both sides by 6, and I find that x is going to be equal to 13. If you wanted to, and it wouldn't be a bad idea, you could go ahead and you could plug these values back in to find the length and the width of this swimming pool, and make sure that when you add all the 4 sides together, you get 80. The next example says a rectangular garden with a 4-foot wide cement sidewalk is shown. The cement for the sidewalk is half a foot deep. It gives us the diagram, and then it says volume equals length times width times height. The question that we're trying to answer is what volume of cement is needed for the sidewalk. For this problem, I'm going to have to think about how much cement I need. I don't need cement inside of the garden because then my flowers couldn't grow. I only need cement in that white area around my flowers. So what I'm going to have to do here, I'm going to have to find the volume of the larger rectangle. I'm going to have to find the volume of the smaller rectangular garden, and then I'm going to have to subtract them. I have no way to just find the volume of a frame directly. I'm going to have to find the volume of both rectangles and subtract the smaller rectangle from the larger rectangle. I'm not given directly the dimensions of my larger rectangle here. However, I do know that the cement sidewalk is 4 feet wide. So if you look at the height of this rectangle is 6 for the garden. So for the outer rectangle or the larger rectangle, I would have to add 4 to each side of that, which would give me 14. Same idea for the 16-foot length. I would have to add 8 for twice to find the length of that side. So the volume of the outer is going to be 14 times 24 times 0.5. We know that the cement sidewalk is half a foot deep. I just went ahead and wrote it as a decimal because it doesn't matter, first of all, but also it's just kind of easier to write on here. So 14 times 25 times 0.5 is going to give you a volume of 168 cubic feet for the whole larger rectangle. I'm going to use that same formula to find the area, the volume of the garden, which is going to be 6 times 16 times 0.5, which is 48 cubic feet. Now, I don't need cement for the garden. I don't need that 48 cubic feet from the garden. I'm going to go ahead and subtract it from the larger outer rectangle. And when I do that, I get B, 120 cubic feet of cement is needed. The next example says the circumference of a circle is 10 pi inches. What is the area of the circle? They've given me the circumference. They want me to find the area. In order to find the area of a circle, I have to know the radius. What I can do here is I can find the radius based on the fact that the circumference is 10 pi. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plug in 10 pi for C, the circumference, in the circumference formula, which is going to give me 10 pi equals 2 times pi times radius. I need to isolate or solve for r. To do that, I need to divide by 2 pi on both sides. My pi's are going to cancel out, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So 5 is equal to the radius. Now what I can do is I can take that 5 and I can plug it into the area formula, which will give me area equals pi times 5 squared. Well, 5 squared is 25, so the area is going to be equal to 25 pi. If you look at your answer choices, you'll notice that they left their answer in terms of pi, so I don't need to multiply by 3.14 or anything. I just already know that my answer is C. This says to find a unit rate or unit price, remember to divide the ratio created given the situation. A unit rate has a denominator of 1. An example of this says there's 120 students in 3 buses. The original ratio would be 120 students to 3 buses. If I wanted to know how many students were in just one bus, I would go ahead and divide both the top and the bottom by 3 to get 1 in the denominator. So 120 divided by 3 is 40, and 3 divided by 3 is 1. That means that there's 40 students in each bus, or 40 students per bus. Anytime you see the word per, P-E-R, you're going to know that that's going to be a unit rate. If I said each pencil was $2 per pencil, you would know that it was $2 for just one pencil. The next example says the weights and prices of 4 brands of dog food are shown in this table. It tells you brands W, X, Y, and Z, how much they're going to weigh in pounds, and the price for the bag of dog food. What they're asking us is which brand has the lowest unit price. In this case, my unit price I'm going to find by figuring out how much it's going to cost for just 1 pound of dog food. So I'm going to have to divide all of the prices by how many pounds are in the bags. So for brand W, I'm going to take the price, 7.49, and divide it by 8. When I do that, I get 0.93625, which means it's going to be about 94 cents per pound. For brand X, I'm going to take $9.99 and divide it by 10, which will give me 0.999. For brand Y, I'm going to take $17.99 and divide it by 20, which will give me 0.8995. And then for brand Z, I'm going to take $28.99 and divide it by 30, which gives me 0.96633, and I think 3 keeps repeating. The lowest unit price is going to be brand Y because it's only going to cost about 89.90 cents per pound as opposed to everything else which costs over 94 cents really per pound. This example says when comparing two values, sometimes we can use proportions to solve for a missing value. The first example of this says at a candle store, the ratio of green candles to red candles is 2 to 5. The store has 4,900 candles. How many candles are red? I'm not a huge fan of this question, just FYI, because we have to assume that this candle store only carries green and red candles, which, if you think about it, that would not be a smart choice to only have green and red candles if that's all you were selling. So it tells us the ratio of green candles to red candles is 2 to 5, which means for every 2 green candles, there are going to be 5 red candles. It also tells us the store has 4,900 candles. That means for both red and green candles, there's 4,900. I have to set up a ratio here, and I need you to pay attention and just listen to this really quickly. I'm going to say X over 4,900. X would represent how many red candles there are total. Over 4,900 is the total number of candles that they have in the store. Equals 5 because they told us green to red was 2 to 5, so the 5 is corresponding to the red candles. Over 7. Now where I get 7 from is 4,900 is the number of green and red candles. So my bottom number of the second ratio also has to be considering both green and red candles, or including green and red candles. So because the ratio that they gave us was 2 to 5, I can add 2 plus 5, which would give me 7. So out of 7 candles, 5 of them are going to be red in the store, if that kind of makes sense. It's a little bit confusing. To solve a proportion, I can cross multiply. We've already done an example of this. 7x equals 24,500. Divide both sides by 7, and you get D, 3,500 red candles, which is a ton of red candles. Like I said, not a fan of that question. The next example says, Antonio read the first 60 pages of his book in 40 minutes. At this rate, how long should it take Antonio to read the rest of his 210-page book? This one, again, they tried to trick you. You have to read these proportion problems really, really carefully. We can set up a ratio of how many pages he read to how long it took him, 60 to 40, pretty easily. We have to be really, really careful, though, with the next piece of information that we have. At this rate, how long should it take Antonio to read the rest of his 210-page book? He does not have 210 pages left to read because he's already read 60 of them. So 210 minus 60 is going to be 150. So I say 60 pages over 40 minutes, that's how fast he read the first 60 pages, equals 150, which is how many pages he has left to read, over x, which would be the amount of time it takes him to read those pages. So go ahead and cross multiply. You get 60x equals 6,000. Divide both sides by 60, and you get x equals 100, or 100 minutes. It will be how long it takes him to read these. Be careful on these problems. Sometimes they'll take it from minutes and they would say 1 hour, 40 minutes instead of 100 minutes. Don't freak out. All they've done is changed it and converted, told you how many hours combined with how many minutes it would add up to 100. Remember, percent means out of 100. This first example said that a football game, 80% of the fans were rooting for the Rams. Of the fans rooting for the Rams, 20% bought souvenir footballs. What percent of the fans of the game rooted for the Rams and bought souvenir footballs? One of the key words here is going to be of the fans rooting for the Rams. Of. Anytime we see the word of, we can think multiplication. So if percent means out of 100, I need to multiply these two percentages. The percent, 80% can be written as 80 over 100. 20% can be written as 20 over 100. We can multiply these two numbers because it says of the fans rooting for the Rams, 20% bought souvenir footballs. So of indicates we need to multiply. Well, 80 times 20 is 1,600, and 100 times 100 is 10,000. I'm going to go ahead and cross out my 2 zeros at the end because they're both in the numerator and the denominator, which gives me a ratio of 16 over 100. Well, 16 over 100, if percent means out of 100, can be rewritten as 16%. So my answer is B. The next example says a drink dispenser fills cups at a rate of 2 ounces per second. Adrian has a 64-ounce cup that already contains 18 ounces of water. How long will it take the dispenser to fill the rest of Adrian's cup with water? I don't have 64 ounces left to fill, or Adrian doesn't have 64 ounces left to fill. He's already filled up 18 ounces worth of water. So the first thing I need to do is take 64 minus 18. That's how many ounces the cup can hold, minus how many ounces it already has, which means he has 46 ounces left to fill. Now, it's not going to take 46 seconds because this drink dispenser fills the cup at a rate of 2 ounces per second. So I can divide how many ounces he has left by 2 to tell me that it's going to take 23 more seconds for him to fill his cup. A review of exponent rules. If you remember, the multiplication rule for exponents says when you're multiplying powers with the same base, you are going to add the exponents. The division rule says that when dividing powers with the same base, you subtract the exponents. When you have a power to a power, which means that you're going to have like x squared in parentheses and then to the fourth, you're going to multiply the exponents. And when you have a product to a power, you're going to distribute the power to all factors inside the parentheses, and you're going to multiply the powers each time. This first example says an angstrom is a unit of length defined as 10 to the negative 8th centimeters. Using a microscope, a scientist is looking at a particle 10 to the 3rd angstroms long. What is the length of the particle in centimeters? We need to go ahead and multiply how long the angstrom is by how long the particle is. And when I do that, I get 10 to the negative 8th times 10 to the 3rd. Notice I have two powers with the same base 10. So I can add the exponents. Negative 8 plus 3 is negative 5. So my answer is C. The next example says the snowfall at Jackson Creek was recently measured at 0.4 inches per hour over a period of 9 hours and 30 minutes. How many inches of snow did Jackson Creek receive? Well, we just need to take how long it snowed and multiply it by how many inches fell per hour. We need to be careful here, though, because 9 hours and 30 minutes needs to be rewritten so that it's only containing hours, because the rate that we know the snowfall fell was inches per hour. So any time that we have needs to be measured in hours. Well, 9 hours and 30 minutes is the same as 9.5 hours. So I'm going to take 0.4, the rate at which it fell, times 9.5, the amount of time that it fell, which tells me that 0.4 times 9.5 is 3.8. So Jackson Creek received 3.8 inches of snow. The distance formula is distance equals rate times time, or D equals R times T. D stands for distance, R stands for rate or speed, and T stands for time. The example says Sarah drove her boat at 5 miles per hour for 45 minutes and at 4 miles per hour for 30 minutes. What was the total distance in miles that Sarah drove her boat? We have two different speeds or rates here. What we need to do is we need to find how far she traveled at 5 miles per hour and how far she traveled at 4 miles per hour, and then we can add them to find the total distance. To do that, I'm going to have to use the distance formula twice. So I'm going to have the distance at 5 miles per hour would be 5 times 0.75. The reason why I can't use 45 is because I have miles per hour for my rate, so all of my time needs to be measured in hours. Well, if you think about a clock or think about time, 45 minutes would be 3/4 of an hour, which is equivalent to 0.75. 5 times 0.75 is 3.75. Now, to find the distance at 4 miles per hour, I'm going to do a very similar thing. This time my rate would be 4, and my time is going to be 0.5 because 30 minutes is half of an hour. Well, 4 times 0.5 is 2. Now I'm going to take those distances, 3.75 and 2, and I'm going to add them together. When I add them together, 3.75 plus 2 is going to be 5.75. 0.75 is the same as 3/4, so my answer is B. This is all of the examples over 1.1. Remember, this is just the first review, so if you want to keep watching the next video, we'll be over 1.2, and all of these videos will help you to prepare for your Algebra 1 EOI.